Hey guys, this is Sam with SneakAndShow.com. We're doing a video series today, which is Mono Red Devotion, which we have here. Hey, Mono Red. Okay, so I've been helped out by my good friend Nick Watson, who's recorded 3 videos with me, and he's borrowed some cards off Daniel Unwin. So big shout out to Dan for helping us out with that. Um, so what we're doing today is we're just taking it through some of the tougher matches that it's going to go through in the metagame. You'll see that I've already done these recordings, by the way, but you'll see that it hasn't been 100% win rate, but the matches have been very close despite the fact that devotion decks are conceivably poorly positioned against Thoughtseize and removal decks. So what we played today was a blue-white deck, a mono-black deck, and a black-white deck. I don't feel like I got particularly lucky. I don't feel like I got particularly unlucky, but never really curved out, so to speak, and showed the deck's potential as far as raw power is concerned. And what you have with this deck, though, is that you have a deck, unlike Mono Blue, which is an entirely synergistic deck, a deck that can have pieces removed and still function. And that's what I like about it as a devotion deck, and why I would recommend it to all of my friends. So, yeah, so let's go through the deck list. What we have here is we have your basic devotion fillers, which are, well, some of them are fillers, but not so much as they are in Mono Blue. You're not playing any Tidebinder mages, which really don't ever turn on against the big main decks of the format. You have the 12 2-drops. Burning Tree Emissary being mana efficient, can fill in anywhere on the curve. Ash Zealot on 2 is almost as good as playing a 1-drop anyway, and it has first strike and whatever, so it's quite multitasking efficient against multitasking efficient. Good line. Um, it's got a lot of multifaceted angles to it in that you can attack with it, you can block with it, you can beat aggro with it, you can beat control with it. Card's good. Frostburn Weird is a good blocker as well as a good attacker. Even if it requires a mana commitment, being able to do 4 damage a turn is a big deal for a 2-drop. It's not the normal case, and if you're left with just this as your threat, you're normally pretty fine against the control decks. I quite like it a lot. We have 4 Boris Reckoners, which, there's been a lot said about Boris Reckoner. Boris Reckoner is just a strong card. Strong defensively. Offensively, 3 damage turns a pretty slow clock, but it's nothing to sneeze at. If you can get a couple of hits in with these, each against control decks, you're doing alright. Fanatic Amogus is obviously the nut. This card does 8 damage sometimes, 11 damage sometimes, straight lethal by itself. It's really got no roof. When it's not on, it's only a 4/2, which does damage when it enters, but that's still not a bad deal. And I really like it. I think it's strong. It combines particularly well with Hammer of Purphoros. So you'll get a lightning bolt plus a 4/2 haste, which is a really good deal. And I like that aspect of it. It's not something you would ever play less than 4 copies of. We'll put it that way. The Stormbreath Dragons are obviously a powerful card. You can just read it for yourself. It's good against control, good against everything, but its main purpose is as a control killer. You need to have access to 4 of these. I tried playing with 3 of them for a little while because I couldn't afford the 4th on Magic Online, and it was it was fine. I was getting by. I still wasn't losing tickets, but at the same time, the 4th makes a big difference. You want all 4. Card's really strong. Let's move on to Purphoros. Purphoros is 6/5 for 4. Pretty sweet. But it does have weak sides, and that is that it is devotion enabled, and that can be disrupted quite easily in this format. A lot of decks are set up to do that. In those cases, you have its other mode turn on, which is as an enchantment, which is an overrun effect, plus it deals 2 damage whenever a creature enters the battlefield. It's very strong that it can do that. Every now and again, you can find control decks run out of gas, and then you just hit a couple of 2-drops, and it's a 6/5, and you just lethal them that turn. And it combines particularly well with Hammer in that way, in that you only need one other creature, well, one other non-fanatic creature, to make it into a 6/5. But I mean, the card's strong. I like 2 in the deck. It's probably the weakest main deck slot, but at the same time, it's doing a lot better than playing Cloudfin Raptor and Tidebinder Mage, which I find the Mono Blue deck is probably the best comparison to this. I would say they're different decks. This one has individually higher card quality, whereas that deck has things like Thassa and Master of Waves, both of which are really, really nuts. Fnatic is not Master of Waves. Card's good, not that good. But you do have cards like Storm Breath, Boris Reckoner, and Ash Zealot. Frostburn Weird is in that deck, but it's a lot better here. You can activate it a lot more. You don't actually have to curve out. You don't have to play all your spells because all your spells are good. You don't have to have 4 on the board to get a job done. We have the hammers because they're good against mono black, good against control. I find that being able to make 3/3s is occasionally relevant late game against the aggro decks. The card's just really good. I would suggest that it's probably the strongest of the weapons. Bident is contextually strong. Whip is contextually strong. Bow is pretty bad. And what's the other one? I'm forgetting something. Oh, the spear's very good as well, actually. I think it's probably a race between hammer and spear for whatever the best weapons are, best god weapons are at the moment. But I quite like the hammer. It's the one I play with, so it's the one I'll back in that race. We have a Singleton Chandra. We don't want to because it's not actually good against everything. It's not that it's ever bad because you get to +1 and kill small guys against the aggro decks, and it's mainly control killer. But it's not quite as relevant as the Perfrost or the hammer in the main deck. So you only find 1 copy of this, but you only find a couple of copies of each of them because they're legendary, and you don't want to ever be found with a dead card in hand, which I think is fair enough. So let's move on to the sideboard. The sideboard has this package for anti-aggro. The Chain to the Rocks and the Mizzy Mortars complement the 3 main deck copies of each, and you'll find that you bring them in against non-aggro matches. You'll quite often put in a Chain to the Rocks, take a Mizzy Mortars out, or just put them both in because you need to remove their guys more than you need to play creatures. But generally you want to be proactive and you try to keep to this minimum of 6, this sort of baseline minimum 6 removal spells. You probably can't coast by with much less than that in this format. But yeah, sometimes you'll put in up to 8. Against aggro you definitely will. But otherwise it's sort of a combination of getting your guys on the board and then removing whatever's stopping you winning the game. And you don't really want to remove everything because that's not your strategy. That's mono black. You want to just remove whatever the problematic permanent is. The Chain to the Rocks is quite strong for that. Kills Desecration Demon, which can roadblock you quite a lot, and it kills Master of Waves, which can straight end you. So that's why we have the full commitment to 4. It's not quite as good of a spell as Mizzy Mortars, generically speaking. Having an overload option, being able to kill Blood Baron, being able to be cast off Bone Tree Emissary makes Mizzy Mortars very strong. But they both have their merits, and they both have a really good reason to be in the deck. I wouldn't recommend playing less than 4 of each in the 75. The Anger of the Gods, entirely for the aggro decks. That includes Mono Blue Devotion, because they get out so far ahead of you that you can easily collect 2 or 3 dudes with this, and it's pretty strong for that. And yeah, it's quite good against stuff like the white-black aggro deck that's been really well positioned in the GPs and winning GPs, because it kills, and well, not kills, it exiles all these dudes. And that means Zathrid Necromancer, or however you're meant to pronounce that dude, is never going to trigger. And that means that they don't get a zombie for each of their guys, and you just clean the board up 1 for 1, or well, 3 for 1 sometimes, and you can just start playing all your better spells and take over the game. The Assembled Legions are going to come in against control, but they're mainly for the mono black decks. They really can't remove it. If they don't have anything on the board when you play it, you just straight win. If they do have something on the board, like a Desecration Demon, they probably lose anyway. It's not going to catch you up in a game that you're really behind in, but everywhere else it's pretty strong, and it's definitely worth the 2 copies. I would think about running 3, but 2 strong, and I see really no reason to change. Burning Earth is for the control decks. It's a lot better against Esper than it is against blue-white. It needs an answer from those decks, so they can't let this just resolve. They can't let it not get detention sphered, and that's why it's in the sideboard. I'd really like this to be something else, though. I'd want one of them to be a Chandra after the testing I've done recently, and I'll probably go and get another one. And these other two, I'm not sure. Maybe they stay Burning Earth, maybe they change it to something else. I like what it does, and I think it's the best thing I have found so far, but it's not my favorite card in the world. I would encourage people to have a look for other options and possibly tell me if you found something else. But it does fill the role of requiring removal, and in the control matches you bring in a certain density of cards that require removal, and they are eventually overloaded and they can't remove one of them, and that just allows you to win. The next card is Hammer of Perforos. This comes in against some of the control decks, but it's mainly for the black matches. To be honest, it really sucks not having a hammer out against them because their cards are all bigger than yours late game. So if their game plan comes to fruition and they get to remove all of your dudes, you get to have a hammer, and every time you draw a card, it's either a guy or it's a 3/3 because you've drawn a land. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to stay in games and top deck wars that you have no business winning otherwise. So this is sort of your underworld connections, but mainly it just makes all your top decks worth it. Sometimes the haste is relevant. It can certainly help burn someone out, but it's the second ability that you have the third copy in the sideboard for. We have 3 Boros Charms, which are also going to come in against the control decks. It's mainly for, well, it's for 2 things. It's for dealing 4 damage, which isn't really for burning someone out as much as it would be in an aggro red deck. It's for killing planeswalkers, so you get to kill Jaces and Elspeths. Assuming that you can do that 1 extra point of damage, you can just take them off the table. And the other reason is it's Supreme Verdict proofs your team. And if you got 2 or 3 guys, they tap out for a Supreme Verdict. Even if you've just got 2 Burning Tree emissaries on the table, protecting your team means that they require another answer for your emissaries. They just got time walked and they take an extra 4 damage. And if you've got, for instance, a Boros Reckoner and a Frostburn Weird, that's actually 7 damage that they're going to take on the next turn because their Supreme Verdict didn't work, or something like that. So very strong. I don't think you want 4, but 3 is really good, and it has proven quite good for me. We've seen a lot of Boros Charm over the last year, so I don't think I'll be surprising anyone by telling you that this card's quite powerful and quite well positioned. The Wear Tear is for killing Detention Sphere more or less, but it's also for killing Spear of Heliod, and just whatever you really need to bring it in for. I like having the singleton because if people have a weird deck list, you can bring it in, and it can be a sort of generic answer. You always have a card to bring in against rogue decks, pretty much. It's very good against Detention Sphere, and that's a good place to be because that spell's probably the best removal spell in the format, Detention Sphere. So having an answer to it's really good, and being able to blow people out at instant speed by getting a guy back, whether it's sometimes it's a Boros Reckoner or something like that, or a Perforos or a Chandra. I've had occasions in which it's been a Fanatic, and basically all they allow you to do is rebuy your Fanatic Enter the Battlefield effect, which is pretty much always just lethal. And anyway, I would encourage people to play a Wear Tear. It's quite possible that I should be playing another one of these instead of a Burning Earth because it is an answer to Detention Sphere. Whilst it doesn't require an answer, it does trade 1 for 1 with one, which is it's a good place to be, and being instant speed's great as well. It's basically a white spell. It's basically Tear. Sometimes it's Wear Tear in that they will have a Detention Sphere and a God's Weapon, but mainly just for Tear. So bringing in another one does mean that you're playing an extra white spell, and you'll see that there is quite an extra commitment to white in the sideboard. The mana base means with the mana base you've only got 9 white sources, so it's worth thinking about. You don't want to not be able to cast your spells. And there's some situations where you can actually devotion off Nykthos with a Boros Reckoner in play to get a few extra white sources into your deck effectively, but it's not really common play, and it's something that you really need to consider how much white you actually play in this deck. As far as the mana base is concerned, I have 2 less mountains than most people. I have 2 Temple of Abandon filling those slots. I like having the extra scry. You have no 1-drops in this deck, which is interesting. Chain to the Rocks is the only 1-drop in the entire 75, and it doesn't come into play on turn 1 unless you have a Sacred Foundry and a reason to play it. So it's really a deck that starts its curve at 2, and I feel like you can get away with playing extra come into play tap lands. We play 6 temples and a guild gate, so that's 7 come into play tap lands. But because we're really barren at like 1, 3, 4. I mean, there's a few 4 drops, there's a few 3 drops when you have the hammers and the Boroth Reckoners, but normally you can find a spot to play them where it doesn't hurt you too badly, and it also allows you to sort of have some smoothing as far as drawing the lands you need is concerned, or drawing spells when you have too many lands. It doesn't really have card selection here. It's not like you'll often bottom that many cards because it's not good in the matches, because they're mostly good in most matches, most of the cards. There's certain situations where you don't want to see Perforos, for instance, or Reckoner is really not what you're looking for, or you see it's Burning Tree Emissary, but you're looking for a Stormbreath Dragon. But mostly speaking, they're mainly to hit land drops or to bottom lands when you have too many already, and that's sort of the role that they perform here, which is kind of interesting. I believe there's one of the videos that I have recorded in which I go on about how much I like Scrylands, but I'm a big fan. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, guys, this is Mono Red Devotion, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave something in the comments. I am very interested in hearing what people have to say about how these videos have been recorded. This is the first one for me, so I am really looking to get these to a stand where everyone's really keen to watch them and happy to have a look. So if you have any suggestions, improvements, or just a general feeling about anything, let me know, and I'm happy to make those improvements. I'm assuming people want to see a bit of standard. I'm recording this for an Australian audience primarily, and we have that GP Melbourne coming up, so standard is a pretty important format, not to mention that it is the current PDQ format. So that's the format I'll be having a look at most at the moment. But if people are interested in something else, let me know about that as well, and I'm happy to make some videos in something else. Okay, alright, thanks for listening and watching. I will see you guys in the matches.